My name is Sarah. I'm 35, a mother of two lively boys, and a marketing professional. My life has its challenges and stress, like any other woman juggling work and family. Still, I've always thought my husband, Mark, and I had a pretty good thing going. We've been together for over a decade, and we've built a life I'm proud of. But lately, something's been off. I can feel it in the little things. It started as small moments I tried to brush off, but now it's impossible to ignore. It's like there's a wall between us, and that wall is his phone. At first, I thought it was just work. Mark's job is demanding. He's an IT specialist, and being constantly connected seems part of the deal. I've always tried to be understanding. I know he works hard for us, and I appreciate it. But recently, I've noticed he's glued to his phone more than ever. It's not just about work anymore. It's when he's home, sitting on the couch, lying in bed, even when we're at the dinner table with the kids. He's there with us physically, but his attention is somewhere else. And it hurts. One evening, as I was putting the kids to bed, I could feel the weight of the silence between us. Usually, after they're asleep, we'd share the little moments of our day. We'd joke, laugh, and sometimes vent about whatever was bothering us. It used to be our time, but lately it's been different. When I came back to the living room, Mark was on the couch, phone in hand, his face illuminated by the screen, fingers scrolling aimlessly. I sat down next to him, hoping he'd put it away, but he didn't. "So, how was work today?" I asked, forcing a smile, hoping he'd respond, and maybe, just maybe, put the phone down. "It was fine," he replied, not looking up. I sat there, feeling a strange mix of frustration and sadness. Fine? That was it? I waited a moment longer, hoping he'd elaborate or ask about my day. But there was nothing, just silence and that soft glow from his phone. It's hard to explain the loneliness you feel when the person you love is right beside you, but feels 1,000 miles away. It's even harder when you have no idea how to bridge that gap. I started wondering if maybe it was me. Was I not interesting enough? Not supportive enough? Had I let our connection slip away without realizing it? All sorts of questions filled my mind, each one making me feel more anxious and insecure. I'd bring it up gently, hoping he'd tell me what was going on. But each time, he'd brush it off, saying he was just tired, just stressed from work. But it wasn't just work, I could tell. I'd seen the way his attention drifted to his phone every time I tried to talk to him. He'd pick it up mid-conversation, or suddenly have something urgent to respond to. Even during family outings, he'd be on his phone. I'd watch him scrolling while the kids played, hoping he'd look up, catch my eye, and smile. But that smile rarely came. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I decided to be direct. I walked into the living room and sat across from him. "Mark, can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, surprised. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, feeling a lump forming in my throat. "I just feel like you're not really here anymore, even when you're home. You're always on your phone, and it feels like we're not connected. It hurts, Mark." He sighed, putting his phone down, but his gaze remained distant. "I'm just tired, Sarah. Work's been a lot lately." I nodded, trying to be understanding, but something didn't sit right. I know work is stressful, but it feels like more than that. It feels like you're pulling away. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked down, fidgeting with the phone in his hand, like he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "It's not you," he finally said. I don't know, Sarah. I feel like I need space." Those words cut deeper than I expected. Space? From what? From me? From us? I had so many questions, but I didn't know where to start. So I sat there, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The days that followed were quiet, tense. I tried to give him the space he wanted, but I didn't understand why he needed it. I started noticing things that maybe I'd ignored before. Little signs that he was drifting further and further away. When he'd come home from work, he'd barely greet me, going straight to his phone or computer. He stopped asking about my day or sharing his. Conversations became brief, surface-level exchanges, and the warmth between us felt like it was fading, replaced by a kind of indifference I'd never seen before. One night, as I lay in bed beside him, listening to the faint sound of him typing on his phone, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I wanted to reach out, to grab his hand, to tell him how much I missed him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was scared that he wouldn't care, that he wouldn't respond, that he'd brush me off like he had so many times before. I started questioning myself more and more. Was I being unreasonable? Was this just a phase? Maybe this was just how things were supposed to be after years of marriage. Maybe I was holding on to a fantasy that wasn't realistic. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. This wasn't just a rough patch. It was something else, something deeper. And it was tearing me apart. The weeks turned into months, and the distance between us only grew. I tried to keep things together for the kids, to maintain a sense of normalcy, but it was exhausting. I'd put on a smile, act like everything was fine, but inside, I felt like I was slowly unraveling. I missed him, the real him, the man who used to make me laugh, who used to hold my hand, who used to look at me like I was the most important person in the world. Now I was just there, a part of the background. One evening, as I sat alone in the kitchen, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe I should talk to someone, a therapist, or even just a friend. I needed to process everything I was feeling, to understand what was happening and how to cope. So I reached out to my best friend, Emily. She'd always been there for me, through thick and thin. When I finally told her everything, she listened quietly, letting me pour out my heart. And when I was done, she looked at me, a sympathetic smile on her face. "Sarah, you deserve to feel loved, to feel valued. This isn't something you can fix on your own. You need to talk to him, really talk to him, and make him understand how much this is affecting you." Her words hit home. She was right. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I needed to confront this, to face the reality of what was happening. So, I took a deep breath and prepared myself for a conversation I'd been dreading for far too long. That night, as Mark and I sat in the quiet of our living room, I finally let my guard down. I told him everything, how lonely I felt, how hurt I was by his constant distraction, how much I missed him. At first, he seemed taken aback, almost defensive, But as I kept talking, as I let the tears flow, I saw a glimmer of the man I used to know, the man who cared about me, who loved me. "I didn't realize," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "I've been so caught up in everything. Work, stress, everything. I didn't see what it was doing to you, to us." And in that moment, as we sat there, holding each other, I felt a sense of hope. It wasn't a solution, and I knew we had a long road ahead of us. But for the first time in months, I felt like he was really there, really with me, and maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. As days went by, Mark made an effort to put his phone down more often, to be present with me and the kids. It wasn't easy, and we had our ups and downs, but each step brought us a little closer, a little more connected. We started talking again, laughing, sharing those little moments that had once felt lost. It was a journey, one filled with challenges, but we were in it together. As Mark and I began to reconnect, I found myself rediscovering the love we'd once shared. It wasn't instant, nor was it easy. There were still times when I'd catch him reaching for his phone out of habit, and each time, I'd feel a pang of that old hurt. But he was trying, and that effort meant more to me than he could ever know. We decided to take small steps to strengthen our bond, starting with little changes around the house. Mark and I agreed to set aside specific phone-free times in the evening, times when we'd be truly present with each other and with the kids. No screens, no distractions, just us. At first, it felt almost strange, like we didn't know how to simply be with each other without the usual digital buffers. But over time, it became something I cherished. The house felt warmer, more alive, filled with the laughter of our boys and the sound of our voices. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, we settled on the couch together, sharing a bottle of wine, something we hadn't done in years. I looked over at Mark, noticing the little lines that had started to appear around his eyes, the subtle silver threads in his dark hair. I realized that in my own sadness and frustration, I'd forgotten that he too was human, that he too carried his own burdens. "Mark," I said softly, touching his hand, "what happened to us?" He looked down, his face thoughtful. "I don't know. Life, maybe? Stress? Somewhere along the way, I think we just drifted." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I didn't know how to deal with everything that was going on at work. It felt like I was failing, like I couldn't keep up. And instead of talking to you, I just pulled away. I didn't want you to see me like that." His words hung in the air, each one resonating with the hurt and regret I'd felt for so long. In that moment, I saw him not as the man who'd caused me pain, but as someone who'd been hurting himself, hiding his vulnerability behind a screen. "I wish you'd told me," I said, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "You don't have to go through things alone, Mark. I'm here. I've always been here." He took my hand in his, squeezing it gently. "I know, Sarah, and I'm sorry. I've been so selfish. I didn't realize how much I was shutting you out." He looked into my eyes. His expression softened. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose us." Hearing those words brought tears to my eyes. It had been so long since I'd felt truly seen, truly understood. We sat there, holding hands in silence, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. From that night on, we made an effort to reconnect in small ways. We'd stay up talking, sharing dreams and fears we hadn't voiced in years. We started taking evening walks together, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just the two of us. We'd talk about everything and nothing, relishing the simplicity of just being together. One night, as we strolled through the quiet streets, Mark reached out and took my hand. "I missed this," he said, looking down at our intertwined fingers. "I missed you." His words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in so long. I realized that the love we shared was still there, buried beneath the layers of routine and distance, waiting to be rediscovered. But our journey wasn't without its challenges. There were still moments of tension, times when old habits and insecurities resurfaced. I'd catch him absent-mindedly checking his phone, and my heart would tighten, fearing that we'd slip back into the same patterns. And he, too, struggled to adjust, to let go of the need to constantly be plugged in. It was a gradual process, one that required patience, forgiveness, and above all, trust. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I found myself questioning everything again. I wondered if we were fighting a losing battle, if the distance between us was simply too great to bridge. But as I sat alone in the quiet of our bedroom, I remembered the words Emily had said to me all those months ago. "You deserve to feel loved, to feel valued." And I knew, deep down, that I still loved Mark. That despite everything, I still wanted this marriage to work. The next day, I suggested we try couples counseling. At first, he was hesitant, resistant even, but after seeing how much it mattered to me, he agreed. We began attending sessions with a therapist, a warm, insightful woman named Dr. Bennett, who guided us through the process of reconnecting, of understanding each other in ways we hadn't before. In those sessions, we delved into the root of our issues, exploring the fears, insecurities, and unspoken expectations that had driven us apart. It was painful at times, facing the raw truths of our relationship, but it was also freeing. For the first time in years, I felt like we were truly communicating, truly seeing each other. Through therapy, I came to understand that Mark's attachment to his phone hadn't been about rejecting me, but rather a way of coping with his own anxieties and insecurities. And he, in turn, began to see the impact his actions had on me, how his emotional distance had made me feel isolated and unvalued. Slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship, one step at a time. We started setting new boundaries around technology, making a conscious effort to be more present, more engaged with each other, and with our kids. We learned to express our needs openly, to voice our fears and frustrations without judgment. And little by little, the walls that had once separated us began to crumble. As the months passed, I felt a renewed sense of closeness with Mark, a deeper understanding of who he was and who we were together. Our love was different now, not the infatuation of our early years, but a quiet, enduring bond that had been tested and strengthened by hardship. Looking back, I realized that the struggles we'd faced had brought us closer, had taught us the importance of communication, of being present, of cherishing the moments we shared. I knew that we'd continue to face challenges, that life would test us in new ways, but I also knew that we were stronger, more resilient, more committed to each other than ever before. And in the end, I understood that love wasn't about perfection, about avoiding conflict or pain. It was about choosing each other day after day, even when things got tough. It was about the willingness to fight for each other, to grow together, to rebuild, to forgive. As Mark and I grew closer, our relationship felt like it had moved into a new chapter, one where we were both willing to be vulnerable and open. I was no longer afraid to tell him when I felt ignored or hurt, and he began to lean on me more, sharing his worries about work and life instead of retreating behind his phone. It was a profound shift, one that brought us not only closer as partners, but also as friends. In the months that followed, we discovered the joy of simply being together. We began planning small weekend trips, just the two of us, while Mark's parents watched the kids. These little getaways felt like a breath of fresh air, a chance to step away from the daily grind and focus on each other. We'd spend hours hiking in the woods, exploring small towns, or just sitting by the beach, watching the waves roll in. These moments reminded us of our younger selves, of the couple we had once been, and the love we had built. During one of these weekends, we found ourselves sitting on the balcony of a small inn, watching the sunset over a mountain range. Mark turned to me, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, I didn't realize how much I'd missed this," he said, his voice soft. "Being with you, without all the distractions." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I missed it too. I missed us." He reached out and took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "I promise, Sarah," he whispered, "I'm not going to let us drift apart again. I don't ever want to go back to that place." It was a simple promise, but it meant the world to me. In that moment, I realized that this man, with all his flaws and fears, was still the person I wanted by my side. We had weathered a storm together, and we'd come out stronger, more connected, and more deeply committed to each other. As the months turned into years, we continued to nurture the love we had rebuilt. We made it a point to keep those phone-free evenings, to have regular date nights, and to take time for ourselves as a couple. But more than that, we learned to be intentional with our words, our actions, and our time together. We also made it a priority to model this new approach to connection for our kids. We wanted them to see that love and relationships required effort and care, that they weren't just built on grand gestures, but on small, everyday acts of kindness and attention. We tried to show them the importance of being present, of valuing the people in front of you instead of getting lost in screens and distractions. One night after dinner, our oldest son, Ethan, looked up from his homework and said, "Mom, Dad, you guys are always talking and laughing together. It's like you're best friends or something." Mark and I shared a glance, both of us smiling. "We are, Ethan," I replied. "And that's one of the most important parts of being married, being there for each other and being each other's best friend." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, as if storing away the wisdom for another day. In that moment, I felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that our journey, our struggles, and our growth were not just for us, but were shaping the kind of family we wanted to build, the kind of love we wanted to show our children. As the years went on, Mark and I continued to face challenges, new jobs, moves, the pressures of raising teenagers, and the inevitable ups and downs that life throws at you. But now, no matter how difficult things got, we knew how to lean on each other. We knew that our love was not something to take for granted, but something we had to protect and nurture every day. One evening, years after that difficult chapter, we found ourselves in our living room, watching an old home movie of when the boys were little. We laughed at their high-pitched voices and silly antics, marveling at how quickly time had flown. As the video played, Mark reached for my hand, and we sat there, side by side, taking in the memories we had created together. Looking at him, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the love we had shared, for the hard times that had brought us closer, and for the journey we had taken together. He squeezed my hand, as if reading my thoughts, and leaned over to kiss my forehead. "I love you, Sarah," he whispered, his voice filled with warmth. "I love you too, Mark," I replied, my heart full. As we sat there, surrounded by the laughter and memories of our family, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, with love, patience, and a deep, unwavering bond that time could never take away. In the end, I realized that our story wasn't one of perfection, but of resilience and rediscovery. We had learned that true love was about more than just being together. It was about choosing each other, day after day, and never letting go, even when the world tried to pull us apart.